Welcome to the Behind Beliefs and Behaviors podcast, where we take you on a journey of what is behind the specific beliefs and behaviors that impact individuals and organizations. With our guests, we get to the root cause of what stands in the way of everything from health, wealth, and relationships to leadership, community transformation, and societal progress. From topics on leadership, psychological safety, corporate culture and communication, to parenting, trauma, relationships, personal health, and intimacy, this podcast is sure to get you to the source and provide you practical tips to transform your life one root cause at a time. I am your host, Dr. Maisha Claiborne. I'm a physician, a coach, a consultant, and an expert in trauma-informed communication. The founder of the Mind Remapping Company, I help individuals and organizations better understand the brain, behavior, and the root of false beliefs so that you can more effectively listen, communicate, connect, and create fulfilling relationships and results in your personal and professional life. Join us every Monday morning at 8 a.m. and let's get to the root cause and discover what's behind your beliefs and behaviors. So today I really want to talk about this idea of personal development as a process rather than a destination, and the 3 traps that people fall into when they're pursuing their personal development, when they're growing, when they're in their work, when they're going about their lives, the 3 traps and some 3 tips to really moving through this sort of process that can be uncomfortable. If you've listened to past podcasts, if you ever heard me speak on stage, I often talk about the 4 stages of learning. Just one of the major things that I notice, and this is just working with organizations, this is working with individuals, is that sometimes I come across people, actually more often than you would think, when they're in these either positions, high positions of authority, or if they have done a lot of work before, or if they are by society and many people's standards considered highly educated, they're at this destination like, I already know. And I think that is one of the biggest and most dangerous thought traps that you can have is the I already know. I've already done that. Because it presumes that you have developed yourself to a point where you no longer need to learn anything new, or where you are already at the destination of the highest level of enlightenment or personal development, which if you have done any type of development, then you know that personal development is a mountain with no top. And you may have heard me say that. I say that all the time. And so I'm sorry to say that if you're just learning about this process of personal development or personal growth, as we call it as well, that growth is always happening if you are choosing it. All right. So one of the biggest thought traps is that, hey, I already know, I've already done this. I don't need to do that anymore. I don't need to learn anymore. I've already done all my healing. I don't need to peel back any more layers. That is one of a sort of a dangerous thought trap that people get into wherever they are in their journey, in their career journey, or their relationship journeys, or their personal journeys. And so I want to start with this whole process of the 4 stages of learning, because I talk about that often. And I think that some of the reasons why people don't pursue or don't stay in personal development, we're going to talk about that. I think that that's due to the 3 major reasons. So the first thing is I'll talk a little bit about this whole stages of learning. And I talk about this a lot when I'm in front of the room. The first is this unconscious incompetence. So when I talk about incompetence, we're not talking about what most people hold in their minds as incompetence. It's just like the things that you don't know, right? So you're sort of blissfully unaware, and you're walking with sort of this unawareness of something, right? So that's unconscious incompetence. But then you move into this space, something happens. Sometimes there's an event. Sometimes you hear something. Sometimes a friend shares something. Maybe you're listening to a podcast and you recognize, oh, there's something to learn. There's something that I don't know. And so then you move into this space of conscious incompetence, the thing that you don't know. Now, this is one of the places where, depending on who you are, can be very uncomfortable because we don't like to not know, right? We don't like to not know. But then you pursue the learning path. And as you pursue the learning path, and whatever it is, you start to learn the thing, but it's not quite second nature yet. So it's effortful. It's effortful and it's clunky and it's not perfect. And this is a second place where personal development can be, or learning, period, can be uncomfortable because as much as we may like to learn, we don't like to learn imperfectly. We don't like to take imperfect action. And in the work that I do in anti-oppression, we often talk about why people get stalled in this type of work. In But in personal development, this is another reason why people get stalled, because once you discover that you don't know something, and you go into the learning process, especially for people who are high performing people, you expect that you're going to get it right the first time, and you expect for it to be perfect. And that is another dangerous thought trap, is expecting perfectionism at any given time. Maybe there's something that you do that does come out perfect in your mind, in your mind's eye, or in your set of standards, but expecting that all the time is very dangerous because it can put us in inaction. So then you've learned the thing, and then at some point you move from it being effortful, to it being second nature. And so you move into this space from conscious competence to unconscious competence. So you have this sort of spectrum from unconscious competence, that blissful unawareness, that thing that you don't know, into conscious incompetence, the thing now that you don't know, the skill that you don't know, or the idea that you're still learning, that you need to learn. And then you move, as you practice, as you go on the learning journey, you move into conscious competence, which is the effortful nature of it, which is I gotta practice. It's clunky, it's not perfect. And then you move into that second nature once you practice it enough. Now, this is the key. Moving at any given time from conscious competence to unconscious competence takes practice. And second nature can also be a very deceptively dangerous place to be. Why? Because when we relegate things to our unconscious, when we get so good at things that they're second nature, we often forget that there is more to learn, and we get comfortable inside of second nature. And so the thing about that is that there's always going to be something in our blissful unawareness place. There's always going to be something that you don't know that you don't know. And when we get to this space of unconscious competence or second nature, sometimes we get so many things, so many skills inside of that second nature that we begin to feel like there is very little left in that blissful awareness state. And I think that is a dangerous place to be. I think one of the reasons why people don't push past, once we get to a certain point of second nature, acquiring so many skills in that second nature, and the so many skills can lead us on into success paths, can lead us into financial abundance paths. It can lead us into successful relationship paths. It can lead us into great parenting paths. It can lead us into many different paths that, when we get a certain set of skills, when we become an expert in whatever it is that we are, that expert is like that second nature, we can resist wanting to expand to that next level of conscious competence or conscious incompetence, right? So one of the things I think that, or three things I'm going to tell you, I think that prevent people from wanting to go beyond or go back into that state of conscious incompetence and conscious competence, is that, number one, people not understanding that personal development is not always linear. Generally speaking, if you think about the stock market does lots of things, right? It goes up, it goes down. Now, it may be trending up, maybe platform, maybe trending down, but it's not linear. And that is the way personal development is as well. Personal development is not linear. Oftentimes when you allow yourself to recognize the state of unconscious of conscious incompetence, right? The thing that you allow yourself to pull into the awareness. You search for the unconscious incompetence. You search for what is it that I don't know. How do I put myself in a space where I can continue to discover that will expand my capacity to impact the world, to impact my organization, to be a better parent, to be a better spouse or partner, to be a better friend or family member? What do I not know that I need to know? When we begin to do that, we start to get, well, the things that we thought that we were great at, maybe there's more to learn, like communication, for example, or being a person who listens well. Maybe you consider yourself a good listener. Maybe you consider yourself a good communicator. But having done all of the work that you've done in communication and having people tell you that you're a good communicator does not mean that there are not more techniques, more ways you can expand your listening, places that maybe you hadn't thought about before, unconscious incompetences that could actually elevate your level to connect with another. Okay, so now it's not linear. You thought, oh, I was good at this, and then you found out, wow, I'm okay, but there's so many things to learn. Now, the second thing is personal development in whatever domain that you're dealing with it. And let's talk about it in the domain of communication. It is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. So here you are thinking that you're a master communicator, a great listener, and then you discover there's all this stuff that you don't know about listening. And then to learn new ways of listening, to learn new ways of communicating, and not have it be perfect, right? Conscious incompetence to conscious competence, and have it not be perfect when you're practicing, it feels uncomfortable. So I'll tell you, when I do my trainings, my coach certifications, and I talk about, a lot of it is initially the foundationals, learning new ways to listen, learning new ways to listen, not just with our ears, but listen with our eyes, being like expanding our powers of observation, and also new ways to use language that break down the resistances, that help people to navigate conflict, that help people to loosen the grip on their problems. That's a lot of what I teach when I teach communication in organizations, when I do my coach certifications. And when I do the coach certifications, we go really, really deep into the deconstructing language. Oftentimes, people who are coming to my trainings are physicians, or they're coaches, very experienced coaches, or they're therapists, or people who really know how to listen. They know how to communicate. They're highly educated. I've had attorneys, executives. And what happens is, because they're learning something, the language that we're using is a little bit different. The skills and tools are things that maybe they hadn't heard of before. It gets very uncomfortable because it's new. And the way that we're teaching to listen, the way we're teaching to lean into the discomfort of communicating, is different from what they're used to and what they've learned, based on their model of the world, based on their own filters, and based on their own mental model of what good communication is. It is uncomfortable. And the other piece I think that is very scary for people is it dives into the realm of the unknown. Even before you embark upon some personal development, and I've had people share this with me, one of the reasons why they may not choose to do deep work with me at any given time is because they're afraid of what they'll find out. It's unknown. So what people tend to be more likely to be comfortable with the discomfort of their not knowing than stepping into the unknown of something new. because of the context from which they're looking at it, which is, what if it's bad? But the question I always pose is, well, what if it's great? What if it's unimaginably good? What if it transforms how you interact with people? What if it has the capacity to increase profitability of your business? What if it has the capacity to bring you closer to your children than you ever thought before? What if it has the capacity to create a psychological safety between you and your team or your partner or whatever, in such a way that they want to stay and they are able to give the most of themselves? This piece of the unknown is actually very scary for people because we are in the space where we always need to know. It's another thought trap that you always need to know. And a lot of growth occurs in stepping into the unknown and being flexible enough to manage the obstacles along the way. 3 things that I'd love to leave you with about how to navigate the discomfort of personal development more easily. Number 1 is to normalize that it's a process and not a destination. And I think that's so important. When we normalize that personal development is a process, that personal growth is a process, then we can get ourselves unstuck from this place of, I already know. And I invite you to look in the places where you already think you're good. Look in the places where you already think you are an expert. Look in the places that you've been avoiding personal growth. Because when you look in those places, then you have the most capacity to make a bigger impact in whatever you're wanting to make an impact, whether it's your organization, a team, your community. So look at those places. Normalize it being a process rather than destinations. One of the reasons I say look in the places where you've been avoiding is because even if those places don't have direct relationship to what your main goals are, that thing impacts it. So how we do anything is how we do everything. And everything is interconnected and interdependent. Okay, so it's not a separation. The second thing is, do personal growth and personal development work alone, but also do it in community. I find that when I'm doing my trainings, whether I'm doing trainings in organizations or whether I'm doing them in my own personal certifications, I find that when it's a shared experience, the growth is deeper and it actually takes away some of the discomfort because we don't feel like we're alone. We don't feel isolated. We don't feel like, oh, I'm the only one dealing with this, or I'm the only one in this boat of conscious incompetence or conscious competence. I'm not the only one that's doing it imperfectly. I'm not the only one that's human. You can do the work alone. It's great to do the work alone, the journaling, the reading of books, the introspecting, the meditating, but it's even more powerful to do it in community. And that's why I like to do work with organizations, because even just doing this type of work in organizations does help to begin to bond and open up some levels of safety when it's done correctly, when it's done right. All right. When it's done in a safe way. And then the third thing is to surround yourself with resources that empower and restore you when the development does get uncomfortable and when it gets difficult. So the resources can be things that you do to restore and empower you, or people that you speak to restore and empower you. And when you surround yourself with the resources, then it helps for the work to be palatable and bearable. It helps for you to manage the discomfort in a way that works for you. And there are lots of tools and resources that I teach inside of the trauma informed communication course that I have, and when I work with organizations and leaders, and of course in my certifications, they learn all the tools. I just think that it's important that we begin to understand that if we're going to really forward transformation in the various areas that we're working, we do need to focus on people and personal growth and development as well as process. Okay. And in doing that, understanding that it is a process, and it's a necessary process. We see what's going on in the world around us right now. And when I look at it from my vantage point, I see a bunch of people who are chronologically adults who are arrested in development. They're arrested in some childhood stage of development, and it is caught, and it is causing, you know, it is causing them to wreak havoc on people's lives. And so I'll leave that at that. But I do want to let you know that if you are interested in learning more about the work that I do in terms of expanding psychological safety, expanding the level to which you can communicate in a trauma informed way through a trauma informed lens, I do have a course, Communication That Transforms. And so you can, if you're listening, it will be in the show notes. If you're in an organization and you want me to come and speak on trauma, on psychological safety, on trauma informed communication, then just reach out to me and I'm happy to speak with you. And as well, if you're interested in, you're like, what is this NLP training? What is this certification? Then you can see a little bit more about that on the website. So pass this on to a colleague, pass this episode on to a friend, and don't forget to leave a review, because we do like for people to know that we're making a difference. And so I look forward to hearing your thoughts about personal development as a process. And we will see you on the next episode. So until then, stay empowered. Thank you for listening to our podcast. We know that without the listeners, there is no podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe so you do not miss when we drop our next episode, and share this podcast with a friend, a family member, and a colleague, at least one person in your life today. This episode was brought to you by the Mind Remapping Company, helping organizations create psychologically and emotionally safe cultures that make their employees and leaders feel seen, heard, respected, welcome, and valued, all while fostering a thriving, engaged, and healthy workforce for the organization. Is your organization in need of a speaker? I speak about topics like psychological and emotional safety, trauma-informed communication, and employee well-being. If this is aligned with your organizational inclusion, belonging, or leadership goals, contact me, Dr. Maisha, by going to www.mindremappingacademy.com. That's mindremappingacademy.com. Finally, we train leaders, but we also train coaches. If you're interested in becoming a trauma-informed coach, visit our website as well and check out our NLP coach trainings and certifications. We'll see you on the next episode. Until then, stay empowered.